That's called You Cracked It, Bruce. It's lovely. I was just sitting there thinking, you know, Christmas ought to be about once every 5 years, so we could really appreciate it. Now, don't you think that's a sterling idea? You know, you kind of get used to this beauty and to this beauty and to shame. It's a shame what we get used to and we forget the transparent that's occurring so far beneath the ground, so far beneath the externals of our life. I really gave the essence of a Christmas message last week, so I'm sorry if you weren't here, you missed it. This morning I'd like to really share with you about how you might nurture that Christ, that power that's within you, because I think that's so important. I think we all probably believe in the Christ, in the hope of the world, and the messianic message, don't you? I mean, it's so obvious, my dear Watson. I saw Sherlock Holmes, the young Sherlock Holmes. It's a good movie. It's just fun. Go see it. Bye. She'll be back. You have to get used to the rejection in this business. Someday you won't have Carol Knox around to be kicked around. I wanted to say that for years. But anyway, knowing how to, getting back to what we were talking about, nurturing this spirit within ourselves is a deeply important issue, and I'd like to share that with you this morning because my lesson has to do with the inner feast and how it tends to be something we don't even know is present. You know, there is a magnificent feast. I think that's why I just said this about we ought to have Christmas every 5 years, because we kind of blithely go along and don't pay attention to the wealth, the depth that's going on inside of us. You know, we all kind of get born, and then we think it's over. Well, what happens for you to become born is continually going on inside of you right now and every second of the time. You know that, don't you? You may not be able to see it or be able to know how to pay attention to it or to bear with it even. But there's a feast occurring inside of you. And I'm reminded of the statement in Psalms 23rd. It's a crystal passage. It's the part of the psalm that I love the most, and it goes like this: "And I will prepare a table before you in the presence of mine enemies. My cup runneth over." I will prepare a table before you in the presence of mine enemies. Very few of us, when we're there in the midst of our enemies, realize that there is a table that is prepared before us in the midst of that. Because we tend to see the enemy of ill health, the enemy of lack, the enemy of our children not being exactly how we would like them to, our enemy of not being able to buy enough Christmas presents, the enemy of rejection, the enemy of things not quite being the way we'd like them to be. And so what we see is that there's just an enemy present. There's just something that's inimical to our life. There's just something that's going against where we would like our life to be going. And those words, "and I will prepare a table before you in the presence of mine enemies." And look how the phrase is, "in the presence of mine enemies." And this is supposedly God speaking. So even the enemy is presented to you at the Lord's table. Can you feel that as a part of the divine creation and process weaving its, do any of you care? Okay, weaving itself through everything that's going on. You know, I get up here and get carried away with my poetry, and then I wonder, is anybody listening? So hold that, will you? I really believe in seeds. I believe that a lot that goes on here on a Sunday morning is not apparent. And that what really happens here is that gems get sown, whether it be through music, or you're singing a hymn, or you're seeing somebody, or in prayer, or through my message, and that something gets sown, and then maybe 3 months from now, or a year from now, or maybe 5 years from now, you'll hear that thing, and it will go pop, And you'll say, oh, yes. And what's happened is that the seed got planted, and somewhere when life presented itself to you, your being went interconnect. And I think that's what happens here. So would you take that seed of, and I will prepare a table before you in the presence of mine enemies. My cup runneth over, and put that into some part of you and let me go on, because I'll come back to it. Is anybody here in this room exhausted by Christmas? Could I see a show of hands? The rest of you are lying. Is there anybody in this room this morning that really wishes Christmas hadn't come quite so soon this year? It's a little bit too close to when you lost your mate. It's a little bit too close to your budget. Is there anybody in this room this morning who gets awfully tired of being rejected? Show of hands. I had an interesting experience yesterday. It isn't interesting at all. It's really painful, and every so often I think I ought to share with you. I gave parties Thursday and Friday evening for our volunteers here at the center. In order to go to one of my parties, you have to volunteer. There's just no way out. A lot of people came and said, how did I get invited? And I said, well, you must have volunteered sometime during the year. And then yesterday I had 2 weddings, and when I came into my desk, tired, I'll tell you frankly, tired, because I had about 200 people at my home in the past 2 days. Wanted or unwanted, they were there. And I opened up some of my mail, and I would like to say to you who have sent Christmas cards and shared gifts this year how grateful I am to you. It means an awful lot for you to take the time to sit down and remember me and write notes of saying that I'm worth it, it's worth it, the message is worth it. That's awfully nice. That means an awful lot. But I'll tell you the ones that stand out are the rejection letters. And there was one yesterday. It was 2 pages worth. And it just flabbergasts me. You know I'm a public figure and all that kind of thing, but it's dumbfounding. Rejection is just dumbfounding because, I'll bet you feel like I do. I really did my best. I was really out there giving. Do you ever feel like that? I mean, I'm really into this. I'm one of those poor suckers who got bond, who my favorite line is, I wasn't doing anything. I was just standing there trying to be nice. It's that Sagittarian birthday, I guess. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Do any of you ever get awfully tired of people? Basically, they're boring, aren't they? Let's just pretend that we're the only ones here today, and we'll talk about all those other guys out there. Do you ever get tired of those Christmas parties? Somebody said to me the other night as they were leaving, boy, it was awfully nice to be here because everybody had something to say. I was at a party the other evening and nobody had anything to say, and the silence was terrible. Do any of you ever get tired of putting your heart out there and all it does is get chewed up? Have any of you stopped putting your heart out? Some of you have. Don't you ever just feel good saying inside, I'll get them. I'm not going to give them anything anymore either. I don't care. Some of you look flat-faced this morning. Am I not touching you? I have a few others, but I won't get into them. The reason that I share those with you is that our tendency is to look at those things, those parts of our lives, those disappointments. Oh, do you ever get disappointed? Or have I already asked that? God, I get terribly disappointed. I bet you don't believe that. boy, do I get disappointed. I really count on people's coming through. Do you notice that the ratio between those who do come through and those who don't diminishes every year? Do I sound like Scrooge? I'm not. One of the things that I enjoy doing with life is taking the honesty of the reality of life and looking at it and saying, yes, that's what it is. I don't want to avoid it. I don't want to ignore it. I don't want to hide my head in sand. I do have another awareness, though, that I know that all those things that are difficult on me and on you, and when I listen to you share them, I do know that there's something else going on way underneath that's far deeper than what you presume to be going on. I'll tell you, folks, could I be bold this morning and say to you, what's going on ain't what's going on. Let's pretend this morning that what's going on is that you're carrying a baby in your womb, whether you're a man or a woman. And that what it looks like is you're getting larger and larger. And the truth is that some mystery is unfolding itself inside of you. And you can't see the mystery. And there are a lot of courses out there trying to teach people, look for a miracle. You don't have to look for a miracle. This is the miracle. You're the miracle. The unfathomable, the roots. You're just the bud. Beneath you is a seed and roots and interminglings and holding of hands. And those you're fighting with and those you're struggling with and those disappointments and those regrets and those rejections are the surface flagellations of the many hairs growing out of the top of your head and way underneath. Can you feel this? Can you see it? The mysteries unfolding. Oh God, I want you to believe that. Oh God, I don't want you to ride on top of things as if they weren't happening. I want you to ride in the midst of things, knowing they're happening and understanding the richness is pushing it, protruding it. Do you know what I mean? Do you? You feel it? I just want you to feel it. You don't need a brain to be involved in the spiritual life. You just need an inner eyeball. And that wicked word, patience. Watch. At Christmas time, more than anything, you and I need to know how to nurture this, though. If there is a mystery, if there is awe, if there's something wonderful occurring beneath the surface constantly, we must know how to care for this. And I'd like to share with you this morning a great story from the teachings of Jesus called the Good Samaritan. Do you remember it? It's a story about a Samaritan who was traveling along the road one day, and as he traveled along the road, he fell and hurt himself, and a number of people passed him by on the road, and there's been a lot of chastising of those people who passed him by. There was a priest who went by, typical minister type, you know, pay no attention. And then there was a Levite who passed him by, but then a Samaritan passed by and came to where the man was, and when he saw him, the Samaritan had compassion. And so he went up to this man and bound up his wounds, pouring on them oil and wine. And then he set the man on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of this man, and whatever more you spend I will repay you when I come back." Now the challenge of the story of the Good Samaritan is which of these showed mercy, and the cuteness of the story is that it says that the one who showed mercy was the one who was the Good Samaritan, and nobody ever says which of those 3 showed mercy, and it's possible all of them showed mercy. Interesting. But I'd like to take a look at the Good Samaritan story and talk to you about how you might care for this part of you, because it's so important. The first thing it says is that the Good Samaritan showed compassion. Now, a lot of Christian teachings have taken the story of the Good Samaritan and they've looked at all of you on Sunday mornings, and a lot of you have resented it, and what they've said to you is, why don't you go out and be a Good Samaritan to everybody else? And at Christmas time, I think a lot of us are doing that. We think about buying gifts for everybody else, and who's coming for dinner, and how will I make everybody happy. All the in-laws get along together this year. We're going to make it happen. We're doing a lot of that reaching out, and I'd like to just take the Good Samaritan story and turn it around upon ourselves and say to you, let's be Good Samaritans to ourselves. I don't believe it's possible until you've learned how to take care of yourself for you to be able to care for anybody else. Remember, the Psalm says, I shall prepare a table before you in the presence of mine enemies, and because you can prepare that table, then your cup runs over. Don't you know you can't give from an empty cup? Don't you know that Christmas time can't be an experience of being with or without Scrooge until you feel a fullness within you so that you don't mind going to Sun Valley Mall? I was at Sun Valley Mall yesterday, and I tell you, I haven't seen a scene like that since I was in New Delhi, India in April. If as you wander through those stores and as you get closer to Christmas time, you're feeling more and more drained and you don't feel like buying anything for anybody and you're feeling Scrooge hanging around, there's one reason: you're empty, you're drained out, there isn't much of the Christ available. And if you find yourself wishing so-and-so would give more to you and feeling that dry, that's the signal, folks. When bitterness shows, the signal is the Christ has run out, the full cup isn't there, you need to tap in. So you need a Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan's you. Our earth is very different from the time this story was told. There aren't any narrow, lovely, empty roads anymore. They're all overcrowded. Even in Antioch. Even out in the Delta in my boat. So you have to be your own Good Samaritan. You have to be it to yourself, and compassion is needed. And what's compassion? Compassion is really just something that says, I care about you, and you have to say that to yourself. Just do it for a minute inside of you. Can you say inside of yourself, I care about you? Or are you too big and too important? Sometimes when I look at our leaders here on the earth's surface, I realize how much they need somebody to have compassion for them. How much of Ronald Reagan needs somebody to say, you know, I don't believe in what you're doing, but I know you're trying. And you need to say that to yourself. I don't always like what you're doing, Knox, but I believe in you. Can you say that to yourself? That's compassion. That's having passion with. That's what compassion means. That means having some feeling for yourself. And that isn't self-pity. After somebody heard this lesson this morning, they said to me, you know where self-pity comes from? It comes from the belly. You know where compassion comes from? It comes from the heart. You've got to care about yourself. You've got to be very, very important to yourself. You've got to stroke yourself on the head. You've got to do what Mary does with the Christ child. She holds him in her arms, lays the child in swaddling cloths, and lays him in a manger. Have you laid yourself in a manger recently? I really mean this. And I'm going to go slow through it. If inside of yourself you hear, nobody loves me, nobody gives a damn about me, I'll tell you what you're really saying. I'm not loving me. I don't give a damn about me. Is your first thought in the morning how much you haven't done, how much you're not doing? You need compassion, friend. Jesse Chevalier keeps saying that the world's problems are there are too many people. Well, there are, and there aren't enough people around to take care of you. And if you find a way to take care of you, then you'll have something to give. Your cup will run over. Would you do a practice with me for the rest of your life? The next time you find yourself down on you, would you please just stop and say, have a little compassion for yourself. And see if by having that, your cup doesn't fill up just a little bit. If you can't feel a little more buoyant. Another thing that the Good Samaritan seems to do is that it says that he, I think it says that he places his hands on the one who is hurting on the road. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on him oil and wine. He went to him, bound up his wounds, and poured on oil and wine. I'd like to read to you this from one of the cards I have in my files. It says that Dr. Bernard Grad at McGill University of Montreal has been conducting laboratory experiments with a healer. In one experiment, skin wounds on mice healed faster when the mice were held in the healer's hands. Hands. I had somebody tell me the other day that a way to get through jet lag is for you to just keep on the plane doing this and this and this, somehow that it has some kind of an effect. Just keep paying attention. Hands. What does this fellow do on the road? He binds the man's wounds and places oil and wine on them. Have you placed any oil on yourself lately? Have you gotten so big you don't know how to go up to anybody and say, I'm hurting, I'm needing, hug me please, hold me, touch me? You know, the ones we don't pay attention to are the big ones. Funny, and we're the big ones, you know? You're the one who thinks you'll make it through, aren't you? We're all those good middle class and a little bit pushing toward upper middle class Americans in this room. Did you know that's what most of this ministry is about? Did you know we need churches for us too? Not just the poor, not just the one everybody's going to save, but you and me too. You're the ones that say, oh, I'll make it through, big, strong me, I'm a survivor. When what you really need is to look around and say, you know, I need some help. I need a little loving. I need a little touching. When was the last time you were touched? Really touched, even if you are married. It's not only just us single ones who aren't touched. This morning, the car driving over, I drove over with my 3 dogs. That's enough to deprive you of space, period. And the way we drive over is, my roommate drove in with me this morning too, and Joe was driving and I'm sitting on this side, and I have Cindy in my lap and Chance is in her lap. The 2 little ones, they're up front in the back seat. O'Keefe is there, and he's a big Australian Shepherd, very strong dog. He's a survivor. And you know, when Cindy and Chance hurt, it's obvious. Have you noticed how when the underdogs hurt, it's obvious? Do you realize that we are a country for the underdog? Do you realize that most of you in this room aren't underdogs? You're the big ones. You're the ones who make it. You're the ones who come through. So I turned around, I looked at O'Keefe in the back seat, and I realized he's shaking. He's really shaking, and I still to this moment don't know what was wrong with him. But when I looked at him and he was shaking, I said, come on up front here, O'Keefe. So I moved over, way over here in my seat, and this big hulk of a dog came up. Oh, I mean, it was like tears were coming out of his eyes, and he sat down. He has these big blue eyes, and he just looked at me, and I put my hands on him. And I just kept hugging him, and he kept shaking. And maybe within 10 minutes, I noticed that after he'd been hugged for a while, and I didn't know what words to say. There are no words to say to a dog. And he can't tell you anything. I don't know. Maybe his girlfriend wouldn't let him in this morning. I mean, he has 2 or 3 of them out there. I know. And the amazing thing is that after I hugged him and stroked him and let him kiss me, he turned around, he went back in the back seat. That's you too. You need oil, you need wine, you need to be hugged. Have you hugged yourself lately? You know how you do it? They call it narcissistic, those who don't understand. Wish there were a little more narcissism. It's the only way we can get out from ourselves, you know. And then the Good Samaritan picks up the one who's on the road and puts him on his own beast and takes him to the inn. Inn, a resting place. Have you got a resting place? Do you? Do you have a special place in your home where during this season you can go to and close off the world? How many of you mothers here in this room know how to say to your kids, my time? My time. I'm at the end of my rope. Do you realize the gift you give to your kids by letting them see that you can admit your vulnerability, that you're all used up and they need to respond now, not just you? They won't have to go through what you've gone through in order to take care of yourself. How many of you have an inn, a beach, a quiet spot where you can go to and nurture this thing? And how many of you, when you finally hear inside of you, I've got to get away, I need to go take care of this, ask your whole neighborhood to come with you? Oh, but I really can't leave my husband home. I really can't leave. I can't leave the kids home with me. I can't leave the dogs home. Go take care of yourself. I'll never forget back in 1973 when I was going through a very, very strange period in my life. Somebody taught me how to take a bath. They said you go in there and you put in warm water and lots of bubbly and you just sit in there for a half hour. It took training for me to find how to sit in a tub for a half hour and do nothing. First I wanted Newsweek with me. First I wanted somebody with me. That's more honest. I dated a fellow in the late 70s, one more on my path to hope for unfulfilled expectations, and maybe this was why it all never worked out. He was a marvelous man. He was a salesman, and he was very effective, and he said that he always took 2 days a week for himself, and 1 day a week he never left his apartment. He just had to be alone and have no contact with humanity. That was his inn. Everybody has their own special kind of inn. It's funny, between services this morning, you know what I was doing? I was in my inn, up in my office. And I was putting backings on television tape cassettes, labeling them. And I looked at myself and I said, what are you doing this for? And I thought, this is my way of being inside. Do it make sense? And then the end of the Good Samaritan story is that the man who takes care of him, the Good Samaritan, gives enough denarii to the innkeeper to say, take care of him until he's well. I think a lot of us go part way with this thing. We may come to this Sunday service and say, oh, I'm going to do something about this. So we do a part way effort at it. But the key to this Good Samaritan is that he says, and here's enough money to take care of the whole thing. I hope we all here in this room realize that our sanity is very important. Your well-being is very important if you're going to raise those 2 kids. well-being is very important if you're going to keep caring for that lady who's precious to you next to you. Very important. Your sanity is very important if you're going to continue to maintain your job. I don't know what's very important to you, but your well-being is deeply important if you want to get through life. And it's got to be the most single important thing to you in order for you to be able to survive. You. The Good Samaritan says, everything that's necessary for this person to survive. Sometimes everything that's necessary is throwing out your own family and having a temper tantrum and saying, stop, enough. Sometimes it's saying to that classroom of kids whom you teach 5 days a week, give me space. Sometimes it's being as bold as I was back in 1980 when I said, I can't carry this anymore, I'm going to retire. Sometimes you can't even believe that you could be that courageous, but you've got to know inside of you, I'm important. And the promise is, when you're finished, you'll come up because your cup will be running over. And what's the conclusion to this? Well, the conclusion to this is that the feast becomes revealed. Are you aware that in the book of Genesis it says that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form, and there was a darkness upon the face of the earth. And upon the darkness came the Spirit of God, and it was light. Well, that's what the feast is about. The feast is about having the courage to be in your own darkness. The feast is about having the courage of learning how to be alone with yourself until you can explore your own depths. When you're bored with other people, you're only bored with yourself. When you're tired of other people, you're only tired of yourself, and something's knocking on the inner door of you saying, go deeper. Come on, deeper. There's nothing more to be found out here on earth. There's nothing more to be found in other people. It's all within. There's a baby growing inside of you. Did you know? Just because you got born, it didn't stop. It's still there. It's a baby inside of you. And it isn't a screaming baby. It's a wondrous baby that wants to be known. What one discovers in darkness, what one discovers in the feast, what one discovers under the ground is the mystery of one's own self. It isn't personality, it isn't ego, it isn't career, it isn't what you're going to do with the rest of your life. It's the seeds that are inside that are showing you the way, that indicate this step next, and this one, and now this one, and now this one, now this one, this one. I'd like to close this morning with a wonderful poem by the German poet Rilke. It's the crystallization of this material, and I certainly couldn't surpass it. I am too alone in the world, and not alone enough to make every minute holy. Don't you ever feel that way? I'm too alone in the world, and yet not alone enough to make every minute holy. Isn't that precious? I am too tiny in this world and not tiny enough just to lie before you, God, like a thing, shrewd and secretive. That's what we are, shrewd and secretive. That's what's going on underneath. I want my own will, and I want simply to be with my will as it goes toward action. And in the silent, sometimes hardly moving times when something is coming near, I want to be with those who know secret things, or else I want to be alone. That's the in. I want to be a mirror from your whole body, God. And I never want to be blind or to be too old to hold up your heavy and swaying picture. I want to unfold. I don't want to stay folded anywhere, because where I am folded, there I am a lie. And when you all get pushed into your darkness, when you all get pushed into that table prepared for you in the presence of your enemies, you've been pushed into a fold that wants to be unfolded so there can be no lies, because the only reason there appear to be enemies is because there's a lie within yourself. And I want my grasp of things true before you, God. I want to describe myself like a painting that I looked at closely for a long time. I want to describe myself like a saying that I finally understood. I want to describe myself like the picture I use every day. Phenomenal self-knowing. I want to describe myself like the face of my mother. I want to describe myself like a ship that took me safely through the wildest storm of all. That's the feast. would you let that light lead you inside to your heart? And there, won't you let it guide you to the gift of love you would share this morning? That is your love offering.